forward to
Yeah, I don't have it, but I don't have it with me.
Board of Community Development?
Yeah.
Okay.
Testing. Testing. Let's go ahead and call the Wednesday, February 27th, 2019 meeting for the Historical Preservation Board to order.
Great.
First item on the agenda is roll call.
Board Member Fisher?
Here.
Board Member Field?
Here.
Vice Chair Price?
Here.
Chair Grove?
Here.
Board Member Kastner?
Here.
Board Member Spratlin?
Here.
Board Member Gabriel?
Here.
And Board Member Hill?
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes suggested to the agenda? Can we go have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor? Oh,
Aye.
Yeah, we're going to use the voting board.
oh, pardon? Yeah, for some reason.
Did you turn your thing on there?
Is those on? Am I missing something here?
Madam Chair, it's underneath your binder or your scroll on the top.
Oh, yeah, right there.
Sorry. There we go.
All right, everyone, once more. All right, that's unanimous.
sorry about that.
So the minutes are passed. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the minutes to be approved. Can we have a motion to approve the December 17th meeting?
What we just did.
Pardon? Oh, I thought we had approved the agenda and that.
We're doing minutes. You're
Oh.
approving minutes, right?
Right.
We don't do the.
I thought we had okay. Do we have to do both, right? So can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the December 17th meeting?
A motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please vote. Okay. Approved.
Motion passes.
Do we have any public comment for agenda business on non-agenda items?
Grabbing that form.
No, we did not.
Okay. Is there anybody in the audience that wanted to have a public comment? Do we have somebody? No? Okay, no public comment? All right, general business. The first item is the resolution of the Historical Preservation Board to approve an application for state income tax credit for a rehabilitation of historic property known as the Edson Malcolm Residence at 5603 South Prescott Street. So are we going to hear from you first, Andrea? Yes. Okay.
Yes, thank you. So yes, we are going to talk about the Easton Malcolm residence, and it is on Prescott Street at 5603. It was built in the colonial style in 1926, and in 2006, the City Council designated it as a local historic landmark. In 2018, the current owner, David Huser, has made some upgrades, rehabilitation to the systems in his house, and these are eligible for a tax credit under the state's Historic Tax Preservation Program. And in arrangement with the state, we review these applications locally, and the process is essentially that the applications are delivered to staff, staff reviews them for completeness, and then sends them up to the board for approval. If the board approves this, then I will complete the certificate, which will then go to the applicant, who will include that certificate with the tax returns coming up this spring. So to get into some details here, the applicant has essentially done work in 3 areas of his house. He has replaced a sewer, a furnace, and improved electrical work. One of the criteria, probably the most significant criteria that we'll deal with tonight, is whether or not that work is consistent with the Secretary of the Interior Standards and Guidelines for Historic Structures. And in your staff report, I did put down a couple of applicable standards and one guideline. And the first one is Standard 1, which is a property shall be used for its historic purpose or be placed in a new use that requires minimal change to the defining characteristics of the building and its site and environment. And so with the work that was proposed, essentially this property, which has been residential, remains residential, and there are no modifications to the exterior of the house that would have any impact on significant historic features that are characteristic of the property. I've also included in here standard number 5, which is distinctive materials, features, and finishes, and construction techniques, or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property shall be preserved. And again, the proposed, or the work that's been completed for this is systems, and the work largely was entirely in the basement and under the ground. And so distinctive materials and features and finishes were really undisturbed with this project. There is a guideline specific to mechanical systems, and it says, installing new mechanical system if required so that results in the least alteration possible to the historic building and its character-defining features. And so we do have an additional pipe with the furnace that is that goes from the basement to the exterior of the house, but it is in fact very minor and doesn't impact character-defining features of the property. So staff has found that that criteria has been met. And then in addition to that, we also have some criteria that's listed in your report that has to do with the timing of the property and minimum expenditures, and I'll just go through these really very quickly. The first one is that the house must be eligible for the tax credit, and it is eligible because it is designated as a City of Littleton historic landmark. The next one is that the applicant must be the owner of the property or a tenant with a minimum 5 years lease or more, and the applicant is in fact the owner of the property. Projects must involve physical preservation, restoration, or rehabilitation. And this project includes, again, sewer main replacement, furnace replacement, and electrical repair, and that is considered rehabilitation of a historic property under the program. The next one is that eligible work must be considered to be a qualified expense per the state statute. And this one is a little bit different in that we review for qualified structures and take a look at it, but ultimately it is the state, the Department of Revenue, who will make the determination whether or not the work qualifies as a qualified expense under the program. And so as we do look at the list of qualified expenses, mechanical systems and plumbing are listed. A sewer is not. We're hoping that the sewer line is in fact included in that category of plumbing, and it appears that it can be so, but it ultimately will be the decision of the state and not either the staff or the board. The next one is that the qualified expenses must meet a total of a minimum of $5,000. That criterion is met because the applicant has spent over $16,000. And then the project must be completed within 24 months. The applicant completed it in a little less than a year. So staff has found that the criteria has been met and is making a recommendation of approval. And there is a suggested motion in your packet, and there is also a resolution, and the motion states that if the board would like to approve it, that the staff is authorized to complete the certificate for the applicant. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Any questions for Andrea?
I have one question. Is the sewer line coming into the house the original sewer line? Or has it been replaced or repaired?
It is the replacement of the sewer line. Now, whether it was the original sewer line, I don't know.
It is. The part that was repaired, it is.
Sir, could you come to the podium and introduce yourself
Okay,
and your
thank you.
address?
David and Sandy Heiser, 5603 South Prescott Street, Littleton, 80120. Yes, the portion of the sewer main that was replaced was, we believe, the part of the original sewer line because it was clay pipe.
It was
clay
clay
pipe and cast iron was part of what was replaced.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Andrea? Did the applicant want to say anything to the board?
No.
Does anybody have any questions of the applicant? Okay. All right, I think we can go ahead and go to motion. The motion is on page 4 of 4 of this portion of the packet. And so somebody want to put forth a motion and then we can talk about it?
I'll do it. I move to approve HPB Resolution 01-2019, approving the state income tax credit application for the Easton Malcolm residence, 5603 South Prescott Street, and direct staff to complete a certificate of approval to be forwarded to the applicant for inclusion in his 2018 tax return.
Second?
I second.
Okay. What I'd like to do is go through the 7 criteria here and just see if there's any discussion or if there's any agreement or disagreement with the staff recommendation before we do our final vote. So looking at the first criteria, that it has to be listed on a National Register of Historic Places. Any issue with that criteria?
No.
Okay. Number 2, must be an owner of the property or tenant with a lease of at least 5 years. Any issue? Okay.
No.
Number 3, any discussion or issue?
Nope.
How about number 4? Any discussion or issue that we want to talk about?
I think, Pam, only as regards the sewer line, but I note it's on page 100 of the Department of Interior standards that it talks about mechanical systems, heating, air conditioning, electrical, and plumbing. And although it's not specifically called out that a sewer line replacement would be allowed, it's not called out that it's not allowed. So I think for preservation of the property, you certainly need a sewer line. So in my opinion, that meets the criteria, as does the sod, since you had to tear that out.
Or to put it in. Okay. Anything else on 4?
No, I would agree that sewer is a plumbing entity, but that's up to the state to decide.
Right, but for our purposes, we're kind of in consensus that it does fall in the category.
Yes.
Okay. Number 5, any discussion? I actually went through and made sure all the receipts matched and everything. Yeah, well, we have to do our due diligence, right? Number 6, any issue on this criteria?
It's complete.
Complete. How about number 7, where all the standards are listed? Okay. All right. Anything else you want to talk about before we go to vote? Okay. We can go ahead and vote on the motion. Okay, unanimous, motion carries. So congratulations, good luck.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the referral on the nomination of the Littleton Post Office to the National Register of Historic Places. So I guess first we'll hear from Andrea about that.
Yes, so Historic Littleton, Inc., HLI, has put together, 3 members have put together a nomination of Littleton Post Office to the National Register. And the 3 members are Rick Cronenberger, Sonia Ellingbo, and Gail Keeley. And so, as you know, the post office is located on Prince Street, 5753. And the process for this involves that the local government has an opportunity to comment. The city council has been given their opportunity to comment, and one city councilman, and Councilman Schlachter, has provided a letter in favor of the nomination to the National Register, and that's been included in your packet. And now it's the Historical Preservations Board opportunity to provide comment. And staff has in fact included a letter, a draft letter, that the board is welcome to use in its recommendation to the National Register. The process from here is that any comments received from council and the HPB will be forwarded to the preservation officer at the United States Post Office in Washington, D.C. And from there, the entire application package will go over to the National Park Service, where they will complete the review of the application and make a final decision. And we're not entirely sure what the timing of that is. They are a little bit backed up due to the shutdown earlier this year. But we would expect to see something, I hope, within 3 months following tonight's decision.
And what are typical comments that are expected from HPB?
So I did call the state and asked, what kinds of comments do you get and what kind of involvement? And what I did learn is that almost invariably, the comments that come back are 1 to 2 sentences long, that the council or the HPB recommends that the nomination move forward.
Okay.
Rick Cronenberger is here in the audience, and as one of the preparers of the application, he is prepared to answer any questions if you do have any.
Did you want to say anything, Rick? It's a very extensive application.
It's a very thorough application.
Whew.
It's very good.
I did have a question. Would the government look more favorably on making the Littleton Post Office an historic designation if the original mural was put back into the post office?
No, it won't make
Can
any
you
difference.
say who you are?
Barnerberger, 5796 South Lakeview Street. No, it won't make any difference with the mural. Most of the mural was removed. It was part of the original post office. The interior we have right now is a remodeled from the late 1960s, which is postmodern.
Okay.
They gave up the mural years ago, and there's no place for it to go in there anyway.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter to them.
Okay.
Any other questions of Rick or Andrea? We have to say thank you very much, because that's a
Yes.
very extensive application.
Want some fun? Try writing one.
Can't even imagine. It's so detailed.
I would like to just say what the plan is for the future once this is listed.
Okay.
There is a lot of integrity in the lobby, and once it's listed, then HLI is going to pursue grant applications to get matching money from the post office to restore the lobby.
Oh,
And who knows how long that would take. You have to go through the whole budget process, but I think it would be a good chance because this building has so much integrity compared to many post offices. So,
do you want to let everybody know how long it took from concept to actually getting this far in this process? I mean,
well, I don't know what you mean.
always like in terms of like, wasn't this like take a year and a half in order to?
Well, I spent about 45 hours writing the architectural description and the photographs. We've been talking about it a long time. I mean, Michael had started working on it. There have been discussions, and actually in 1984 or so, there was a proposal to list it. It was denied at that time because of age, and it wasn't quite old enough at that time, 50 years. There's been a reluctance for post offices to list their buildings, but Congress basically passed a law saying the post office has to save their buildings if they're in downtown areas, particularly if they're historic. And then as a result of that, the National Park Service wrote a national context on local post offices, which we reference, which makes the job really easy because then you don't have to justify the significance. You just reference the Park Service significance. And the state also has a context for that as well, which makes it easy. The nice thing about Colorado, to keep in mind, is they write context for many areas of architecture. So local people do not have to do that research. And if you've ever done that, it's a ton of work, as Kim knows as well. So, anyway.
Thank you. Any other questions for Rick or Andrea?
One here, Rick. Were they able to get the roof leak fixed?
They did. I saw them out there in January repairing the gutter in the front.
Oh, good.
But all the people I worked with were gone, and I don't know why they all of a sudden disappeared, but they all were gone, and all the historic photographs I saw in the building were gone, so something happened in November.
Ooh.
But anyway, they did fix the leak.
Good.
So on the two gutters, so.
Is there any plans to do any renovations on the exterior of the building?
Exterior is in
Maintenance?
very good shape. They, last year, or about a year ago, HLI pressed former Congressman Kaufman, when the post office didn't respond, to get money to fix the building, which when Congressman calls up the department, they tend to react favorably to them. And they did a lot of work repairing the roof, repairing the windows. They cleaned all the windows and repainted them. Did quite a bit of work on the outside. So
Good.
it's in good shape. So
I
we're
haven't
lucky.
looked at it in detail, just kind of drive by and see it.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice building. It really is, so.
It is.
All right.
Thank you for your work.
Okay.
Yes.
Rick?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, are we ready to go to motion? There's a suggested motion at the bottom of, no, it's hard to say, page 1, right after the resolution.
I'll move.
Okay.
See if I can read it without my glasses. I move that the Historical Preservation Board support the nomination of the Littleton Post Office to the list of historic places on the National Register, and direct Chair Grove to sign the attached letter addressed to the U.S. Postal Service that reflects HPB's support.
Second.
Okay, and let's go ahead and vote. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Andrea. Okay.
I loved how Rick uses the words easy and 45 hours of work to
Yeah.
prepare in the same sentence.
Okay, so next thing on the agenda is comments and reports. Do you have anything, Andrea, to report?
Well, waiting to hear from the National Trust on the Past Forward Conference, and when we might hear from them about the proposal we put in for the walking tour of Littleton Boulevard. Haven't heard anything yet, but we'll let you know if when and do hear something.
Anything else?
Thank you, Chairman Grove. Mike Sutherland, the planning manager for Littleton. We have no pending business on the March 18th, 2019 agenda for the Historic Preservation Board. We had an item scheduled for that. There was an amendment to the conservation easement and gross for the Carnegie Library, also known as the view easement. But that was pulled off that agenda because the applicant was out of town that evening, and we're targeting the April 15th meeting for that instead.
Okay, so then is there any objection to canceling the March meeting? Is that what you're asking us?
Yes.
I don't think we need to meet just to meet. That sounds great, so everybody will know, since everybody's here, we have a complete board, that we won't be meeting in March and we'll reconvene in April. Okay, that sounds great.
Thank you.
Anything else before we adjourn and we're going to go to study session? Or are we going to have a study session here?
We'll have the study session in the other room, and now might be the time if anyone from the Littleton Boulevard Outreach Committee would like to give an update.
Amy or Kim?
I'll update where we are thus far. We did our tour for the HPB And it was wonderful. We had a great time. We learned a lot, but gosh, it was 2 hours long. So we have to really pare down the Boulevard tour, both for the National Trust and just for usage of tours in the future. One thing that we are working on, Rick Cronenberger happens to be here, Amy and myself and Andrea, is the planning, the real rollout to the property owners of the report that we've all seen. And we're working literally weekly, meeting weekly on that to try to figure out exactly what we want to do, where the venue will be, and how we want to present that, and what we want to happen the next day, if you will, after we present this and maybe create a little bit of excitement with property owners and move forward towards landmarking with willing property owners. So I think we're moving along pretty well. It's a wonderful project, and the corridor is just so cool. It's very fun to work on. So I would encourage, if anybody else wants to join these efforts, you would certainly be welcome. Oh, and we found one more thing. There is a homestead house it's where the Gravina's Windows is currently located, on Littleton Boulevard up towards Broadway. And Homestead House was an upscale furniture store back in the day in Littleton. And the fact that there is a Homestead House in Littleton, again, speaks to that fascinating history of the post-war period and the boom of Littleton and the corridor itself. So we're actually talking with the descendants of the Homestead House family, and she has a wealth of historical information, and also we're planning to interview Sue Sino, who is the widow of one of the founders of Homestead House, who remembers the store and spent many hours in that store. And she's currently in Florida, where she spends the winter, and she'll be returning to Colorado, and she is eager to share her oral history of Homestead House and memories of Littleton. So,
Kim, do you mean the old location for Gravina's Windows or the new location?
This one, the Homestead House, is the new location. The old location is that eatery. I forget the name of it's a Sternberg, a Eugene Sternberg building,
Okay.
of all places. What's that? Mr. Steak? It's not Mr. Steak, it's the Eating Club. That was the old location of Gravina's. But this is the new location, which is a little bit further west on the street. And the building, it's the nondescript little strip center, but when you look at it, it's a wonderful example of that kind of modernist structure with the windows and the parking in the front, and you can tell it's a Homestead House, which started out as Ethan Allen, because it has these little colonial roof vents up on the roof that seem kind of incongruous. But, and just a quick story about Homestead House. Apparently, the people of Littleton and Colorado in general really were not enamored with the Ethan Allen colonial Eastern furniture. And the people who were running this Homestead House wanted to move towards more modern lines like Drexel and some of those modern furniture lines, more California, that fit a Western lifestyle. And it caused a real schism within Homestead House. And they dumped Ethan Allen and went with the more modernistic furniture. And Littleton was a part of that.
Interesting. Thank you. Is there anything you wanted to add, Amy?
No, I think.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for.
I'm sorry, I take that back. There's something to add.
Okay.
So, as Kim said, this is an active project. We're meeting weekly to put together what want to propose for the Historic Preservation Conference and for this upcoming meeting. And we definitely will keep the board looped in with the meeting because we'll need support from everybody on that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for.
And the board will be invited to this soiree.
Oh,
that
of
we're
course.
planning.
Yes, we will be there. Thank you for spending time on that, and I was one of the people that went on the tour, and it was fascinating. It was very, very interesting. A very cold day, and we did take a long time, but it was very, very good. Anything else that we want to talk about before we go to study session? Okay, let's go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and then we will move to the community room. 2019 study session for the Historical Preservation Board in order. And the first item that we wanted to talk about was the grant program, and I think I'll turn it over to Andrea to tell us, kind of review the changes she made and the final discussion points that we need to talk about before we approve it.
Yes, so this is an update to last month's, the January 23rd study session, discussion on the grant program for the 2019 program. And at that meeting, the board made several comments about what things that they would like to see for this coming year, and those have all been incorporated into the new draft. And the first one is that enlargements are an ineligible cost unless required for building code safety requirements. And I will say, just before the meeting, Pam and I had a discussion about that, and so she has actually a little bit of a different memory. So after I get through this, maybe we can discuss that a little bit more to make sure we have it right. The next one is that structures must be a minimum of 40 years age to be eligible for the grant program. And this would, adding this to the program would eliminate brand new buildings from being eligible for historic preservation monies through this fund. The third one is just simply to replace the word criteria with considerations. We thought that the word considerations is more descriptive of what you're doing when you're looking at these applications. And the work need not necessarily meet all criteria as a part of this program, so considerations seem the way to go. Number 4 is that eligibility criteria was just eliminated from one section because it was redundant. And then we were looking at talking about establishing dates, and we're looking at the possibility again of 2 grant rounds like we had last year. The first one would be May 20th, and the second would be October 21st, and that is if additional funds are left over from that program. So, in addition, one of the discussion points was the length of time that property owners and tenants should have to complete the project. And there was some concern that Littleton's program was allowing perhaps too much time, and people are kind of hanging out there with their grant money and not using it. And so staff was asked to put together some research to find out how other facade programs around the state were doing with their timelines. And so I've included that in the packet. I was able to contact a number of different cities, and I think, Pam, maybe you want to take it from here and see what your takeaway from this research was, and then we can get the discussion going.
And just to add on to what Andrea said, in the past we've awarded funds, sometimes large amounts, upward of $30,000, and we've lost it, in other words, because we haven't been able to carry it over from year to year. Now we have a process in place that money is held for us, and it's not tied to a specific project. So we can keep it. We don't hold it. The city has it, and it's given to an applicant, so it never comes to us per se, but it's reserved, it's earmarked, so to speak. Because it's really not fair when we have $100,000 worth of requests, we award $50,000 and then somebody doesn't use it and it rolls off, and it's happened. So we want to prevent that. So if you look on the last page of the document, it talks about right now we're allowing 18 months, the projects are to be completed within 18 months of the date of the award with a 6-month extension. And my takeaway from Andrea's research is that there is a request to start, which we have, where they either have to get the permit or start, and there's an actual date for that. And I say we keep that in place, but the question is how long do they have? And my takeaway was, it varied, but it basically was 1 year. And my thought would be to start with 1 year with maybe 1 6-month extension. And that's just a place to start. I think 18 months is too long. Personal opinion.
So that's start to finish.
Yes. I think we've we've been involved in construction projects on the commercial side and on the residential side, and I just think 18 months is a reasonable length of time. It is a long time now. Historic preservation, renovations, a little harder because you have to get a certain type of individual. So maybe 18 months is long, but I feel they're not in earnest if they're not starting. And if they know that ahead of time, maybe they'll get things lined up and have those preliminary conversations before they even come to us. So, I don't know, thoughts? I mean,
Preliminary conversations, meaning like talking to vendors and
and having a realistic length of time and how long it takes, and if a vendor's available.
Right.
I mean, when I do a house renovation, I'm not going to start, I'm going to get the vendor lined up and then get my funding or whatever.
Because potentially, in addition to getting the funding, they would have to come before the board to get approval for whatever they're doing.
Right.
And build time in for that.
They have to have their COA already done. In the past, they've come to us for grant approval, then the COA, which even lengthens the process. So we're cutting that out, they have to have their COA first.
Okay, so then that more compressed time frame is more reasonable then.
Just to play devil's advocate, there are very few historical contractors that do that kind of work. So perhaps maybe making the timeline shorter is not a good thing for some homeowners, because you might not be able to get the contractor within that 1 year time frame. And even if you did, say you got them within 6 to 9 months, maybe the job takes longer than that.
Well, that's why we would have an extension period. And hopefully it would be, most of these just had the ones had one extension, some had no extensions. They were, 1 year and no extension.
At the same time, they will have gone through the process of obtaining bids, they'll be talking to the vendors, they'll know what that timeline is at that point. So they'll know if they're going to come to the board application this year, or if they need to schedule the vendor and then wait for the following year to actually apply for the grant.
I like tightening it up that way, Pam. Most of these jobs are relatively small. They're, 5 figures as opposed to 6 or 7 figure work processes. So I think that can be done in that period of time, and most of them are. If we look at the Masonic Temple, I think we funded them for 4 years in succession, and they always brought their work in, on time, on budget. And so, they were, I think, the best example that we could have is somebody who proceeded this way. I have a question about the amount, $52,410. Is that where that come from?
Yes, I can.
That's how much we have available.
Yes, I can help out with that. So this is part of that new situation where we can keep money from the previous year. And so one of the grant projects from last year, that was the electrical work done at the J.D. Hill General Store for Carl Peppert. He came in under budget. And so he didn't need all the grant money, so that leftover money is now available in 2019.
Eventually we could accumulate enough that council would say to us, maybe this year we don't give you any. But that's fine. It's better to have it and use it than lose it. And that's what was happening before. So do we want to go with the within 1 year and maybe granted, do we want to say one additional 6-month extension?
That's what I was going to ask. I'm just looking at the data. It looks like only 4 out of however many projects here actually needed an extension. But 3 of the 4 needed more than 18 months total from beginning to end, even after the extension to finish. Well, I should say that's how much time they got extended, how much time they were approved to extend the project. So I'm just wondering, has enough changed now with, you were talking about how now they have to get their approval first and then they come for the grant. Has enough changed that we won't be seeing these, the need for 9-month or 12-month extension again? I feel pretty confident.
Dennis was the one that managed that. I think we've cut down that front-end process. And in some cases, there was
issues beyond the control, political issues or change in management or something.
Right.
And at some point, we have to look at the other people that didn't get that. So they have to manage their project. And I think 18 months is reasonable to manage a project, especially if you have your permit and you've already started. And the size of the project. I mean, I don't know, Paul, do you have any?
I agree. Based on what the grant funds are, we're not looking at major construction here. Seems like on average a reasonable period of time.
And they didn't know up front. I mean, it was much, they didn't have to start at a certain time or everything. So it was, the guidelines were much looser.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I always think about, having worked for government for so long, I always think about the rules that we apply, and then we seem to, just once in a while, we get caught up in unintended sort of consequences of rules where we wish we had more flexibility than we do. Well, and for that one case, where you're like, oh, that they really got a raw deal, or something was very extraordinary, and even with the extension, it wouldn't be enough time.
Well, and now it could go back into the pot, right? If they said, we're not going to make the 18 months, couldn't they say, okay, we're not going to take our grant money? That would go back in our pot, and then we could award it the second around, and they could come back.
Okay, so if they had already started, and they had already committed and spent the money.
Then that's a different story.
Then, okay, they can't come back in late.
Well, then they
after
to get actually reimbursed. They could. As long as it's within,
done.
Yeah, they could, as long as it's within the time period.
They could, I'm sorry, they could do what?
If they couldn't finish in 18 months, but they started the project, couldn't finish it. And they said, we had to say, well, we're not going to pay for this. They could come back and request another grant after the fact, right?
After they completed the
yes.
work.
If the money was still there.
Yes, you could, although remember that one of your considerations is the fact that you get negative consideration for not having completed a grant project.
So it would not be a given that if I didn't complete it, in
They could apply with
2019, I couldn't just, apply next year and just be.
And just from my experience, it seems like the extensions were for odd reasons. From what my recollection was, it was just not getting around to it.
But for those extraordinary circumstances out of their control, we would have that ability. So that gives me lots
I don't
of
know,
comfort.
it would have to be like that, they would have to relinquish the funds,
Yeah.
come back and compete with everybody else.
Yeah, so it would not be a given. It would
No,
not be a given.
right. I understand.
But conceivably, they could keep applying until they got it. And so,
Within, is there any deadline in terms of, do we have a deadline in here, how long after the project?
1 year, I think it says.
I think it is 1 year.
So that would be,
So you could apply for something you completed 3 years ago, seems.
Right.
Perhaps a little too much. I did notice as I was doing the research that out of all the people that I talked to around the state, that Littleton's program is the only one that will fund something that's already been complete, just as an aside.
pardon? Can you repeat that? I was reading.
So out of all the different communities that I talked to, I discovered that Littleton's program was the only one that will fund a project that's already complete.
I mean, I think some of these other communities have stricter guidelines than we do.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so then, are we in agreement on the 1 year?
plus, with a 6-month extension.
With a 6-month extension, 1 6-month extension?
And do we want to clarify that in order to get the extension, the applicant would need to return to the board prior to the expiration date? In the past, we have been doing this at the staff level.
I think you could do it at staff level, honestly, Andrea, and just update the board on where, if they're making some substantial progress in 12 months and they're 60% done, if we know that, I think that'd be fine.
Or perhaps extenuating circumstances, like, for example, we have a grant recipient who dealt with her contractor being in the hospital for 6 weeks.
That's,
Yeah.
can't. And those are city names. But they have been reporting to Andrea, and Andrea's been reporting to me practically on a monthly basis on where they are in the process. So we've been working together.
Thank you for doing that research. That was really
Yeah, it was very helpful.
This is fascinating.
And I know it took time. Thank you.
You know, and I would like to say that in looking through all of this and other people's program, other communities' programs, it occurred to me that since the grant program was first put together in 2005, that Main Street has changed a lot. At that time, there was not a lot of preservation or rehabilitation projects, and now there is. And I wonder if perhaps next year we want to take a look at a study session at kind of the larger context and how to really look at every aspect of the program and maybe compare it to some other programs again to see where we might be able to best make contributions to enhancing that historic character.
That's great.
Just downtown, Andrea, or
Just
could
downtown.
we expand it to the Littleton Boulevard corridor?
No. Well, you could certainly make that proposal to council. But yeah, that would be one idea.
Be a 53.
Very interesting question. I think that's a great idea.
It's a good idea, because the grant program seems to have the same applicants year after year. So it'd be nice to expand the money to other people. I don't know if that's part of people to understand the program's there, or afraid of it, or what, but it just seems like we have the same applicants over and over.
Well, and that,
I'd like to spread the wealth, I guess,
yeah.
if possible.
Right now, you can only get, the only properties that are eligible are Main Street.
So we would
Or
have to
and landmarks.
formally,
And landmarks.
okay, we would have to formally change that language.
Because it is the Main Street
Yeah.
program.
Could we change it as a group here?
You mean extend the boundary? No, that would need to go back to council.
Okay.
That's part of the ordinance.
Well, and maybe that's something we need to think about as part of this review that you talked about.
Yeah. And perhaps that could occur after the grant round, after the 2 grant rounds this year.
But, I mean,
We'll plan
my
tentatively
suggestion
for
is
the
that
fall.
because that would be a great incentive to get these people to land.
Absolutely.
So if they could apply for, and then maybe we even change the criteria and go so far to say, you know, people that haven't applied before. Will we have, do we have something in there about people that haven't? Oh. First time, you know, if you haven't received grants, you get maybe some additional consideration.
In the past, we've had a ranking system where if you're new to the district, you get extra points for joining and then applying. Is that still something we should have in our grant application?
Well, I think it's up to the board, and I do remember that there was a whole point system. And then, you know, I was away from the HP program for a few years, and coming back, I saw that it was no longer there. So I guess it was just my assumption that the board had moved in a different direction, but it could certainly be considered again.
We felt that, I think we felt it was too confining, that we wanted to be able to weight the criteria a little differently based on the situation and the applicants. And actually, assigning points was a little bit too rigid. I think that's really, you guys would.
That made it easier to award the.
I thought we, do you remember, Paul, on that, how we got rid of the ranking system, the actual point system? Remember we had a point system for the criteria, and if you're new to the district, you got 25 points. And
Yeah, there was a preference, yeah, that was weighed heavily. New to the district, the board kind of favored those.
Right, and we got rid of the point system, I thought, we felt it was too confining, I can't.
Well, we don't even have to have a point system, but under the considerations, if a project is in a building that's new to the district, that could be one of the criteria that helps us award that. On number 2, there, Andrea, it says project located on the front facade of the building. What if you have a building that's on the corner of, let's say, Main and Curtis, and so there's a street side? Is there a specific reason that it's only the front facade, or if it's going to enhance the side facade that's also visible, would that be a consideration?
I think think that's a really excellent point. I'm not sure that we've dealt with that in any application that we've reviewed, and we might want to clarify it. We could do that with this program this year, if the board would like.
So the street facade, basically.
Any street facade, front or side, that faces the street.
Yes, in fact, the town of Windsor has a program.
That's exactly right.
And I didn't include it in the review for a couple of reasons, but I did note that for each street-facing facade, so they were very specific about that for corners. I think they allow up to $20,000 for each street-facing facade.
Do we want to change that under costs that are eligible?
I would. Any
This may be a
street.
dumb question, but didn't we approve a grant for the Creamery building on the back of the building? So how would this affect that kind of a project?
Well, that leads
That
back
goes
into...
back to the addition or enlargement, doesn't it?
Right.
Did we come up with a?
What we did was, and there was only a couple of us in that study session. Who was in that study session? It was David and Kim and myself, and we were talking about costs that are ineligible. And we wanted, because of the Creamery, we wanted to say enlargements where required by building and safety codes. And I think we wanted to say that was eligible. That's what I have in my notes. Do you guys remember? Yeah. Okay, so number 4 is just get rid of additions, enlargements where required by building and safety codes goes up to eligibility.
But change the word except to including where required. Because then it would be ineligible if it were required by building and safety codes.
Enlargements?
See, additions or enlargement except where required by building and safety codes. If that's eligible, then it would be ineligible if it were required by building and safety codes. Just semantics, but
Right.
I'd say.
I think it's fine written as it was. It was just semantics of should it be an inclusive language or exclusive language?
So I think it's inclusive, right? Enlargements except where required by building and safety codes?
Well, if it's eligible, then it would be including where required.
Okay.
Only when,
Yeah.
it would be an only,
Or only if, depending on how you want to do it, yeah.
because then any
Okay.
qualified, and I'm not sure that's the intent.
The Creamery's addition, for example, was not required by building or safety code, they just wanted to do it.
Well, I think I think that was one of the topics that we were discussing as well, was there additional plumbing fixture requirements for, and that's one of the reasons why they had to have that addition on there.
Oh, okay.
There wasn't
Yeah,
building
all right.
code.
Yeah, there was a
Or it was required by building code.
So we're going to say enlargements only where required by building and safety codes? And that goes under eligibility, correct?
Okay.
Okay. I want to make sure we have it right. Did you get that, Andrea?
Got it, thanks.
And then before we leave, the one thing that we brought up, I'm looking here, unless I'm missing it, we don't have anything in here about one of the criterias that you're new to the district.
I think we're going to add that.
Yeah, so.
I've got that in my
Okay.
notes, and I'll add that.
So we're all good?
Okay, and I'm waiting till the last minute. You might have noticed there's no photograph on the cover yet.
Okay.
We just change the cover every year. Mike might not know this yet.
No.
And the property owners downtown love it when they see their building on the cover.
Gotcha.
Do you have a picture of the Carnegie Library without the tents in front?
Yeah, that'd be
That'd
great.
be a good one.
Well, the grant program will be sent out in the next week or so, and I'm hoping that the windows at the Spotswood House have been put back in, and then I can take a picture of that one.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
Otherwise, I'll come up with something else.
Okay, so are we good on that one?
One last point of clarification, under what properties are eligible, number 3 is structures must be at least 40 years of age. And I think you addressed that, Andrew. You said something about fringe properties?
New construction, at the meeting last month, board members expressed that they didn't see the program as being intended for newer buildings or brand-new construction.
Oh, I see. So if you're If you're in the district as a non-conforming building, for example, but you're less than 40 years old, then you're not eligible. It has to be at least 40 years.
Yeah, we're trying to preserve historic
The
buildings.
old, okay, I'm with you.
I wanted to give you a quick update. Laura and I are working with HLI on the Historic Preservation Awards. And we're in the process, we've got nominations, and we're in the process of confirming that with the property owners. The awards banquet not a banquet, it's a meeting, will be on May 9th. And we need as many board members that can come as possible. And actually, we are required to have 3 in order to pay for our refreshments, because the city's going to pay for refreshments, and they can only do it if we have at least 3 of us there. So Laura will probably be there, I'll probably be there, so if at least, okay, Amy will be there, and the more, the better.
Is it at the museum?
It's at the museum, it's May 9th, 6:30 to 7 is refreshments, 7 to 7:20, 7:30 will be awards and acceptance, and then there'll be historic entertainment. We're trying to nail that down right now, but it'll be somebody from History Camp, we're hoping, and HLI is working on that piece.
And the awards should be pretty interesting. There's a lot of information and pictures out there this year.
Good. So, and I don't want to, in a public forum, talk about who we've got yet to make sure that they can come, they accept, and they want to participate and all that kind of stuff. Does anybody have anything else they want to bring up?
One thing I was going to suggest was, I know you're limiting the extensions on the grant program to 6 months. Would we want to limit ourselves to that or some extenuating circumstance?
So in other words, if you truly just had, your project goes south with all kinds of things that were truly out of your control, we could conceivably grant more time.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a carte blanche, you give extra time to everybody, but are we limiting ourselves to 6 months?
I think we go back to what's fair to the people that got denied, and the scenario that we came up with for Andy, if they can't get through, we could deny them the funds if they didn't meet the criteria based on whatever the circumstances, and they could then reapply for it.
Within a year and say, here's what happened, will you pay me back now? And then we could say, yeah, that was truly extraordinary. We'll grant you that award to cover your costs now. But if it goes very long and they miss the 1-year window, then, yeah, we don't have a mechanism to award it.
Yeah, they have to compete with everybody else to get the funds. I just think 18 months personally is long enough. Considering that they have their building permit in place, or they have had to have started. Remember, before, we didn't have that criteria, so they had to come and get the COA, and then the process was a lot longer. So now it should be shorter. They should have, all that upfront work will be done.
So what happens, though, if people are depending on the grant funds to whether or not they're going to do the project or not?
Well, they should know, you get
upfront
grant funds if you finish in 18 months.
Oh, no, but what you're doing is you're requiring everybody to get the COA and building permit, and they're spending
Spending money to do
a lot
that.
of money to do something that if they don't get the grant funds, it's not going to happen.
Well, I think any money that's given to you has rules and regulations and stipulations. I don't know about you, but I come from private industry, but I don't get money if I don't do certain things by certain dates. I eat it.
But
that's not my point.
Paul's asking about the risk that it's risky. I would have to expend X number of dollars even to apply, because I have to have all my ducks in a row.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
A lot of the creamery projects, he wouldn't have done it if he didn't get the grant funds. So for him to apply, have somebody do drawings for him or whatever, get a permit, all in advance of whether or not he's going to get these funds. And if he doesn't get the funds, then he spent a lot of money, or whoever the applicant is. I'm just afraid you might
It would have a chilling effect on.
discourage people, and you might have a hard time getting people to apply.
Well, the reason we put these in place is because people took advantage.
I think that, I would say, I knew that the bank got a large grant and it went unused, but those, for whatever reason, that kept being extended year by year without extenuating circumstances. And so.
They have to have a reason, not just because they were lazy.
Well, they did
to get
have
to
a
it,
reason, but the reason, at the end of, 2.5 years, they finally said, well, we're not going to do this project. And then we lost like $36,000. They could have gone to another applicant.
I think the research that Andrea provided is eye-opening, because that was my initial reaction too, like, oh, 18 million, don't shut the door, you don't want to discourage people. But, presuming that the look that Andrea did is she cast a broad net, and it looks like she did. 18 months is pretty generous compared to like Glenwood Springs, which is 180 days. Other towns around Colorado have a much shorter window, even than 1 year, let alone 18 months.
Well, and that information is helpful to compare. I agree with you. It kind of gave me a little more comfort. But, I do think that each municipality or county comes up with its own objectives and has its own culture. We don't all have the same objective. We don't all have the same culture. And if the objective of this program is to incentivize people to put money into their properties, then we should do everything we can to make it easy for them, but protect ourselves from being taken advantage of. So I think you added some, the commission has added some protections in the past with the rollover money and things like that helps.
Would you feel more comfortable if we ran a 12-month extension rather than 6 months?
I would, but I don't have the history you guys have, so.
I just think 6 months sounds short, and there could be projects where getting materials, for instance, historic windows built custom.
Yeah, that
It
takes
takes
time.
quite a long time.
Well, do we want to take a vote on it? I mean, do we need a motion and take a vote on it?
Well, it's a
Study session.
So we don't have to.
Right.
Can we take an informal vote to see, or go around and?
I don't think so.
No, we can't.
Yeah.
So,
It's my last meeting, you can do what you want
well,
after this
no, I mean,
meeting.
you bring up a point.
I'm just saying,
That's a fair point.
I understand, it's just, I look at,
you're not making the program friendly because you're asking them to do all this upfront work without
how much,
any idea whether they're getting any money, which is going to discourage some people. I don't know, there's a couple things going on that I think are going to be harmful to the program, as it has been in the past.
You could consider maybe like one administrative 6-month extension, and then if you need another 6 months extension, it goes back to HPB, something like that.
Extenuating circumstances sort of thing?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good
Consider
suggestion.
something like that and make it levels, you could have levels that step up the urgency.
I'm just saying for that one or two projects, that I'm not saying you give extensions to everybody, not everybody needs one, but there may be a project or a certain circumstance that is necessary.
You could consider
Especially in
something
this
like that.
bidding climate right now where you can't get contractors to bid anything. You can't get people to come on a job for 6 months maybe.
You have a good point, and I like your suggestion.
I think that's a great suggestion. I'm just saying not limited to 6 months. I think it's a great suggestion.
Yeah, too, but
And then it's up to the board to whether or not you really want to go the 12 months, but you're not kicking everybody out after 6.
I think there's a 1 year, so you have to complete it within 1 year, and then you could grant a 6-month extension after the 1 year, right?
Right.
And then maybe and that could be done administratively, and then maybe another 6-month extension, but that would have to come back to the board.
Could that be done on an exception basis? I mean, could we say 1 6-month extension, and then Andrea or the applicant comes back to us and say, here's the list of extenuating circumstances. I would like to get the board to approve another 6 months or 3 months or whatever. I mean, how binding is this document?
think you could certainly set it up that way if that's the way you'd like to go.
Do we have to write it in there that we would do that?
Oh, I don't think so. I can double check on that, but why not just put it in if that's the way the board wants to go, and then everything's clear?
Yeah.
I mean, if it's just at the board's discretion, then, I mean, it's at our discretion on however we see fit. We didn't put circumstances on it.
Well, and maybe what we say is any additional extensions based on extenuating circumstances would be up to the discretion of the HPV.
Yes.
After that?
Yes.
It kind of goes back to establishing rules that you don't want to be too restrictive that for this one thing, who knows what that's going to be. At least it opens it up and it gets it
Just
going.
my perspective is that it just went on and on. I mean, in my business, I will give you this money, but you better have all your ducks in a row and everything in that date. And I don't care if somebody was sick or your vendor didn't give you a bill or whatever. And if you didn't do that, you ate it. I mean, that was the rules. The rules were set up. They were very specific, and there were certain things we had to do, and there was no extensions.
But the point is you want renovation done, and you want to give the money to them to do it.
Yeah.
So
We want
there
to
should be
make
some
people
flexibility.
succeed. But I also want people to be responsible project managers and not be lackadaisical, and that's my expectation. But I have no problem with saying 1 6-month extension. I think we're kind of 1 6-month extension.
And then if you need another one.
And then, if an extenuating circumstances, an additional 6-month extension will be up to the discretion of the HPV.
Yes,
I like
and,
that.
I'm often in contact quite a bit with these grant applicants about this, that, and the other, and I can certainly just set forth those rules ahead of time and say, look, the board may not be too kind if you just kind of put it off for no real reason.
Yeah, it's not
Okay.
inclined
So
to
that
just.
they
Because you're working
understand
at that,
from the
yeah,
beginning. Thank you.
Okay, that was great.
And now, Paul brought up another point, though, and that was the upfront cost to applicants. Can you talk about that at all?
I have a thought on that, Kim. I think if somebody's going to go to the expense and the time to do a COA and be in the process for a building permit, I think the board is going to look pretty favorable at an application like that, because that shows us somebody who is serious about prosecuting their work. So I don't think it really have a chilling effect unless we got so many applications that we couldn't fund the requisite amount of money. But I think that would set us up well for folks coming in, understanding our process, and then having the COA. We know who they were in advance.
It just seems like a lot of those grant program projects were small, and a lot of them wouldn't have happened without the grant money.
Yeah, and a lot of them didn't require COAs. You're correct. Pointing and things like that. Did the Spotswood House require a COA on that one?
No,
The windows?
it wasn't required because
Yeah.
it was considered repair.
Gotcha, okay. So I bet we'll see a lot of applications that don't even require a COA.
What do you think will happen after we potentially open it to the Littleton Boulevard?
We need more money.
Bobby, more money.
Well, if that is not a district, so it would have to be, these funds would be limited to folks that did landmark and, local landmark. And I think it'd be a powerful incentive.
So under what properties are eligible, it says individual historic landmarks downtown that are used for commercial purposes. Now, is that historic downtown?
Well,
What's the boundary of that?
Yes, so it's actually in the code. We have defined the boundary, and I
Yeah.
believe it's from Santa Fe to the railroad tracks, and from Crestline down to,
Is it the old football?
it's
So
not the
it's-
entire, it's the two tips of the football are cut off.
So it's larger than the Main Street Historic District.
It is.
But it's still not West Littleton Boulevard.
It doesn't include Littleton Boulevard.
Yes.
No.
And
So we would have to change that, but you say we have to change that, we'd have to go to council. Yes.
So it's, A, the change would have to go to council, and it's, the document would have to be scrubbed to make sure that you're removing all of that language, and make sure that the language is appropriate.
And that's something we may want to put in queue for next year, because think about how we'd have to back up, we'd have to go to council in the fall because we're designing this at the beginning of the year. So if that's something we want to do, let's just keep that in mind to get council approval then, because it's not always easy to get on their agenda.
That's right.
Okay, we talked about the awards, and then I wanted to say, this is Paul's last meeting.
Oh.
He's been on the board for what, 9 years, 10 years?
10 years, term limited.
10, he's term limited, and since we're not having a March meeting. So I want to say thank you for all your work. And bringing your expertise on the architectural side. It's been greatly valuable.
That's the part I've enjoyed the most, is reviewing COAs.
I mean, but you did volunteer for Western Welcome. I mean, you went beyond that, but especially having your background in architecture really helped. Thank you.
It's been enjoyable.
Do we have any other items that we want to bring up? Okay, let's go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and thank you very much.
Thank you.